Selected parts from the book One Life is Not Enough, Part 38. Post Rajiv's loss in the 1989 Lok Sabha elections, 6 prime ministers occupied 7 racecourse road in the 90s. A new coalition government was formed in 1989 by the National Front, headed by Rajiv's erstwhile finance, then defense minister Vishwanath Pratap Singh. He had resigned from the Congress and the Lok Sabha in 1987 after being dismissed from the cabinet. Arun Nehru and Arif Muhammad Khan also joined the National Front. On 10th February 1990, Nelson Mandela was released from prison. The eyes of the world were fixed on him. The VP Singh government at the center decided to send an additional secretary of the Ministry of External Affairs to convey their greetings to Mandela. It was a thoughtless decision. I suggested to Rajiv Gandhi that a high-powered Congress party delegation should be sent to felicitate Nelson Mandela, to which he agreed. P.V. Narasimha Rao, Anand Sharma and I met Mandela and Mrs. Mandela in a village about 100 miles west of Tanzania's capital, Dar es Salaam. Mandela was deeply appreciative of this gesture. He said that Mahatma Gandhi and Pandit Nehru had been an inspiration to him. He was grateful for the assistance that was given to the African National Congress by India during his 27 years in prison. His dignity, poise, and self assurance were extraordinary. I noticed that he spoke little. His serenity was exceptional. On 21st March 1990, Namibia was to celebrate its independence. I mentioned to Rajiv that this was an occasion which he should be present at. Rajiv said he had received no invitation. I telephoned President Kenneth Kaunda at Lusaka about this, and the invitation arrived within 24 hours. The only means to reach the Namibia capital, Windhoek, was via South Africa. Rajiv refused to go that way. The Zambian president invited Rajiv to travel in his private plane. On the 18th, we arrived in Bombay to catch a flight to Lusaka on Zambian Airways. Rajiv had decided to travel economy class. As soon as the plane took off, passengers rushed to get his autograph. The commotion was such that the cabin steward implored him to move to first class. Otherwise, it would be impossible to serve dinner. Rajiv said that he alone could not shift to the first class cabin. I, too, should be upgraded. This was agreed to, and the crew was more than relieved. Although Rajiv was not holding any office at the time, Kaunda treated him as if he was still the Prime Minister. We were put up in the State House, which was the President's residence. Kaunda hosted a dinner the day we arrived for several delegates going to Windhoek for the Independence Day celebrations. Among them was the Foreign Minister of the Soviet Union, Edward Shevardnadze. He hardly noticed Rajiv. When Rajiv was Prime Minister, Shevardnadze had missed no opportunity to get near him. Rajiv did not react, but I thought poorly of his behavior. Next morning, we left for the Namibian capital in the president's plane. At Windhoek, President Konda and Rajiv were received by the Prime Minister designate Hayes Geingob. The atmosphere was festive and people danced and sang. On the 21st, it rained, which made it difficult to get to the stadium where the celebrations were to be held. Somehow, we managed to reach in time to witness the lowering of the South African flag and the hoisting of the Namibian flag. Rajiv and I were seated along with the foreign ministers of other countries. The name of each leader was announced. When Rajiv's name was called, there was clapping. Before him, the name of Prime Minister VP Singh had been called, but there was no response. The Prime Minister had failed to arrive in time to witness the birth of an independent Namibia. Most African heads of state had journeyed to Namibia for the great event. Mandela sat in the front row. Also present was the South African President F.W. de Klerk. The Secretary General of the United Nations Xavier Perez de Cuellar handed over the reins of state power to President Sam Nujoma at the swearing-in ceremony. It was a historic and deeply moving moment, all the more special for me because I had played a modest role by vigorously supporting Namibia's independence in the United Nations Committee on Decolonization. The following day, Rajiv decided to have dinner at a restaurant. When he arrived, there was spontaneous clapping. Half the restaurant was filled with whites who were not particularly happy at the end of white rule in Namibia. Nevertheless, they honored Rajiv. Early morning the next day, we proceeded to meet Nelson Mandela, who was staying outside the city. Rajiv's opening words were, "When my daughter learnt that I would be meeting you, she said that when I shake hands with Mr. Mandela, I should be thinking of her. This I am doing now." The white community at the moment was not reconciled to giving up their supremacy. The most difficult issue would be that of land, three-fourths of which was owned by the whites. This Mandela felt would be among the toughest problems he would face. Also present at Windhoek was Tiny Roland, an Englishman who had a vast business empire in South Africa. I had known him in Lusaka. He was an amazing character, jovial, calculating, and a genius when it came to trade. I told him that we were finding it difficult to get a flight to London as all seats were booked. Roland said that he had a private plane and would be only too glad if Rajiv and I would fly with him to London. Before leaving for the airport, Rajiv, an avid photographer, walked into a camera shop to buy some film. The shop owner was a white Afrikaner. He would accept no payment. We flew the whole night in Roland's deluxe private plane, arriving in London the next morning. Roland was an entertaining host and his knowledge of South Africa was vast. Before catching the flight to Delhi, Rajiv asked me to contact Margaret Thatcher and the Labour leader Neil Kinnock. We got through to Mrs. Thatcher's office, but her staff was unhelpful. Kinnock was delighted to say hello to Rajiv. Mr. Thatcher later complained to the Commonwealth Secretary General Soni Ramphal that Rajiv had spoken to Kinnock but not to her. Soni passed this on to us and I wrote to her to give the facts. Her office considered that an error had been committed. I had never before been alone with Rajiv. He was always surrounded by crowds. On this trip, he was condemned to spend 5 days in my company. He was the most natural, charming, and least pompous man I had ever met. No sides, no angularities, no pretense, a great sense of humor, and no airs. He made me feel comfortable. He did not like to be alone. He was a technology buff. He had brought a small radio with a contraption that looked like an aerial. He soon fixed it and then we heard the BBC News. While we were in Lusaka, the Indian High Commissioner S.P. Singh invited us for dinner with 5 or 6 Indian expatriates. They were overawed, momentarily speechless, but in no time Raju put them at ease, speaking to them as if they were old friends. He treated them as his equals. From Prime Ministership to becoming a mere MP is like falling from a cliff. Rajiv, however, did not fall. A leader's real test is his conduct in adversity. Turbulence in the early 90s started with the publication of the Mandal report that advocated 27% reservation in a certain portion of government jobs for OBCs by VP Singh. This led to disturbances in New Delhi, culminating in a student immolating himself in protest against the Mandal report. VP Singh's Deputy Prime Minister Devilal fell out with the Prime Minister, whose ouster he sought. VP Singh resigned in November 1990 and was succeeded by Chandrasekhar, the one-time leader of the Young Turks in the Congress. Rajiv Gandhi, who was the leader of the opposition, decided to support him. Chandrasekhar had only 44 MPs. The Rajiv Chandrasekhar partnership was short-lived, though serious differences surfaced between them over the Gulf War following Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait. Chandrasekhar permitted American military aircraft to refuel in Bombay and Chennai on their way to Gulf, and Rajiv took exception to this, terming it the mollycoddling of Americans. Rajiv also made several attempts to speak to President George Bush Sr., but he did not take the calls. Ultimately, President Bush sent a curt oral reply through the US Embassy in New Delhi to Rajiv Gandhi's letter of 7th February. It was blunt. It read, "We have no plans to use nuclear weapons in the conflict. Your recent comments reported in the press suggesting that India should implement its potential to make nuclear weapons are very alarming. Such a course of action would reverse India's firm stand against doing so and could seriously destabilize South Asia. I am also concerned that you have opposed India's decision to refuel our military supply flights to the Gulf. These flights are very important and we hope that they can soon be resumed. Your use of them as a political issue can only damage a bilateral relationship you did so much to build up." Rajiv Gandhi had decided to topple the Chandrasekhar government. PM Chandrasekhar sent Ronan Sen, at one time Rajiv's foreign affairs aide, to show him the file in which Rajiv had approved landing facilities to US military aircraft at Madras and Bombay. It made no difference. Chandrasekhar had to go. Rajiv met President R. Venkatraman, informing him of his decision to withdraw support to the government. Chandrasekhar acted with alacrity, resigning on 21st June 1991 before he could be defeated on the floor of the Lok Sabha. Lok Sabha elections were to be held again, and the Congress started campaigning with full force to regain its former glory. On 17th May 1991, Rajiv Gandhi came to my Lok Sabha constituency, Bharatpur, to address a public meeting for the elections. The meeting concluded at 3:30 am and we reached Bharatpur at 4 am. Rajiv Gandhi, his close friend Suman Dubey, who had accompanied him, and I spent the early morning at the Forest Lodge. Unlike me, Rajiv needed only 3 to 4 hours sleep. He was up at 7 am. After breakfast, we left for Agra, where I said goodbye to him and wished him all the best for the remaining part of the election campaign. That was the last time I saw him. On 21st May, I was campaigning 35 miles away from Bharatpur. It was a dark night and soon there was an unseasonal rainstorm. No meetings could be held in such a weather, so I returned to Bharatpur. There, I was told that Rajiv Gandhi had been killed in a bomb blast by a suicide bomber. I could scarcely believe it. To make sure, I telephoned the Chief Election Commissioner T.N. Session. By a miracle, I got him on the line. Session confirmed that Rajiv Gandhi had been assassinated at 11 pm at Sriperumbudur in Tamil Nadu. My wife and I immediately left for Delhi in the pouring rain. Throughout the drive, we talked about the horrific tragedy. Rajiv was only 46 at the time of his death. Thank you for listening.